What's up, old school homies? Today we're going to talk about why drums are the best instrument. Oh yes, drums. One of the most ancient instruments of all time. Very tribal and ethnic when you start talking about drums. Whenever you talk about ancient cultures, there's kind of a drum in there, isn't there? It's just like they walk around and they hit a drum. There's drums in ceremonies. There's drums in modern music, most all music. Now, I do make some songs that don't require a lot of drums. I'm not always about making, well, actually, I am kind of more partial to complicated drums. But then again, just to have any kind of drums, let's just admit that you're desperate for that in your band or your production or whatever. It's kind of obvious. So you find ways around it. You play without a drummer for a lot of years. Then once you get a chance to, there's nothing quite like it, so you need it, and that's where I started doing electronic drums, which is actually a lot more creative composing wise, unless you're good at drumming, which takes a lot more dexterity and stuff to get started. Actually, I would say it's just as hard to try to get good at giving a shit about composing shit on a drum machine. Because when you play a drum machine, you don't really play, you're pretty much composing. So as you're composing, you need inspiration to go on. And that's its own skill, which is kind of developed better over time. But in the beginning, it's totally foreign, just like playing the drums. And it doesn't really get better unless you want it to. And there's different ways that you can compose drums electronically that matter just as much as playing real drums. Now, you can pretty much cross them over. A real good drummer can do both, like Neil Peart, an early adapter to drum machines and drums at the same time. I'm not going to get too further into that because I've actually tried it. I wasn't the drummer. I had a real drummer. But they actually fell off the tempo of the drum machine. And it's an acquired skill to actually be able to play along with a drum machine if you haven't done it before. It's not the same as playing with a metronome. It's not a click track. Basically, I think what's cool about the drum machine is the composing factor of being able to adjust the knobs and the decays and program through the sequencer where you want the hits to happen. And depending on which drum machine you have, it kind of fates the direction you'll go in. Not entirely. I mean, I make hundreds of drum loops for each drum machine, but you'll run out of inspiration after a while, I would say. Kind of, if you're just experimenting and that's all you do, you'll eventually get tired of that machine. And then maybe come back to it later like I'm doing now. Or just utilize what you have created on it by taking good notes. So taking notes is really what I'm all about, and I think that's really where people are going wrong. You're not really composing anything if you don't write down what you're composing. And I do a pretty simple style, a very simple style. But it's written down every single time. And I feel like just with those pieces that I've created, you have multiple pieces within those. You could add them together. You can create a production with other instruments. You're pretty much king of the band at that point. Like, the drummer is always king of the band because drummer walks away, now you don't have a rhythm. Now, it is important that the drums don't even have a note. I mean, they're not notes, really. I mean, there are percussive instruments that I play that have notes, like the xylophone, but not always. And there are frequencies that sound similar to notes. I've even put a tuner on the fucking amplifier and tried to compose along with the lines that were coming out of the piezoelectronic tuner. So yeah, there is a correlation, but the main factor of why drums are better than any other instrument is the fact that there's not notes. This is more basic. This can layer other things into it easier. So you're creating more of a background, you know, or a texture, a canvas, something that others can fall into inspiration from. Now, the other day it happened to me that I was creating a loop and another loop, and the third loop that I made, I started rapping. Now, I'm not a rapper, and I can't rhyme. My vocabulary is okay, but I just started going, you know, little raps in my head, and the raps never really stopped. It just kept going and going and going, and I said, wow, this loop faded its direction into being kind of good for rapping. I haven't really seen a loop happen. I mean, I've done hundreds and hundreds of loops, and I've never just all of a sudden started rapping, you know, like that was weird. But if you spend enough time composing loops, you'll notice I'm now inspired and I'm ready to move on with another instrument to layer it in. Whether it be something pretty simple, maybe just a little twinkle with the xylophone can help your rhythm section. Taking things in and out, having another kick that's slightly quieter, and then taking out the louder kick, you know, maybe throwing in some fills here and there, maybe transitioning to another drum loop that is similar but has a different mood, you know. There's actually a lot of places you can go electronically, believe it or not. It takes a little bit of skill to get there, but I would say it's just about the same. I mean, then again, there are advantages, you know, there really are to both. And I'm not going to say that one's better than another. I've had my ass kicked by a real drummer. Yeah, that happens. Yeah.